All right, welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. And my good friend Kelsey, she's the CGO. And for people that are unfamiliar, that's the Chief Growth Officer at Shardeum. So, Kelsey, real quick, if you only had 1 minute to tell the audience how to successfully market and scale a Web3 startup, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to stay authentic, set realistic expectations, and figure out what makes you different. And I know that can take a lot of different forms, but if you stick to those key pieces, you're moving in the right direction and you're already way ahead of a lot of projects out there.
Absolutely. And you've had a very storied past you've worked at many prestigious companies like CoinFund, CLO. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that, but definitely Consensus. So talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you've learned from these other companies, these other prestigious companies, and how you're using them for scaling Shardeum.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been definitely a journey through my Web3 experience, but I would say each of those places has given me some really interesting things that I've been able to leverage. Consensus was the very first place that I worked in Web3, and that was starting in 2018. A lot of what we learned there were some of those pieces I just mentioned around setting realistic expectations. The role I had was very focused, especially initially, on community building and community strategy. And we realized that, with a new industry like Web3 crypto, there's so many different terms being thrown out there, and there's so much excitement that it's easy for projects to get a little ahead of themselves. You think that you can have a new feature, or you think that something is going to happen soon. So you want to share it with your community so they can be the first to know and get excited. But even better is not talking about it really until it's ready. And we see this still a lot. And I think it really does, I want to think that it comes from a genuine place of enthusiasm for a lot of projects. Sometimes it doesn't, but really being extremely intentional about the timelines and when you talk about things will go a very long way in building trust with your community and also internally with your team and the project. So that was a huge one. I would say also across all of the different projects and the investment firm I worked with, it was really, really important to be mindful of, your messaging from a compliance and regulatory perspective. Of course, that came into play way more at CoinFund since they're a registered investment advisor. But across the board, it's really important to, again, not be making extreme claims when it comes to what you're doing or promising things that aren't realistic or misleading individuals even when it's not intentional. So I think that that's all of the marketers, all of the comms people should really be keeping that in mind because it's easy to slip, I think, again, due to enthusiasm or due to, you think that this will happen and maybe you truly believe that, but you have to carefully evaluate all of these different statements because really it's going to be how we grow as an industry overall is building the trust and being very, very intentional with those types of conversations. So those are a few things. Another thing I would say is just the importance of being in person and connecting with people across all of these different roles with, of course, a break during the pandemic. There's been so much happening in person and picking a couple events that you've really vetted and attending will very much help you and your project get ahead in this industry.
Yeah, I like that. So of course the in-person events, the one thing I would say that surprised me a little bit is talking about, I don't know how to describe it fully, but like you're kind of talking about like maybe keeping the roadmap and not sharing everything with the community. Like, hey, we're going to build X, Y, Z. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of this because, in Web3 land, I think a lot of people are like, share everything, always be like 1,000% transparent.
Absolutely. So what I mean by that is you can have a general roadmap, but I would say these are kind of our rough targets. If you get too prescriptive with, hey, in 1 month, we'll have XYZ ready for you to engage with, and you start slipping, which happens with a lot of projects, even with the best of intentions, you start losing a little bit of trust. So I do think, along with many things, it's a balancing act. So you want to hint at or let people know general timelines that you can hit. But if you're not sure, I think that it's really important to focus on what you have available now, what is ready now to engage with, while you figure out a little bit more of the details of the timeline moving forward. And I know it's really difficult at times. And like I said, it can be very tough to balance, but I think it's a really important lesson is sharing the right information at the right time will actually help your community engage more and more meaningfully and be able to have more opportunities to share feedback that you can actually implement rather than having them feeling, disillusioned to a degree because they feel like you're not keeping the promises you made to them. Because sometimes, people see a roadmap as a promise, not just as a general outline of what you're planning. And clarifying there is absolutely essential and something that, a lot of projects have slipped up on in the past. And hopefully we all have learned from it.
Absolutely. And for people that are unfamiliar with what Shardeum is, tell them a little bit about what the mission of the company is and where you guys are like, what's your current standing?
Yeah, absolutely. So Shardeum is an L1, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners here are aware. That means it's, a layer one. We're working on the foundation layer here for Web3. So we are really extremely community focused. So we have a massive community right now that's based in India, but also globally. So we're really excited to be a part of the market over there. And a big thing we're focused on as part of that community involvement is low gas fees forever. So that way, if you're building on Shardeum, if you're engaging with us, the intention is you won't have to be worried down the line that suddenly the transactions will no longer be affordable for you and your community. Another really important thing here is, we hear a lot of projects out saying we're solving the trilemma. So of course, we're also solving the trilemma, but I think the approach here really focuses in on the scalability aspect with dynamic state sharding, which leads to linear scalability. So the network is just sort of adjusting as the transactions are coming rather than it happening just manually, if that makes sense. So we have a lot of different pieces that we're working on bringing together to make this into a network that's really special. But I would say that really exciting part for me is that human element, since we're working hard to be a truly global L1 instead of just focused in specific geographies.
Yeah, and let's get down to the marketing stuff because this is the stuff I really enjoy talking about. So let's talk a little bit about. You guys mentioned you have a very big community, and you'll hear in Web3 like community. Talk to them a little bit about how you guys have gone about growing your community.
Absolutely. So I would say a lot of it has been on the ground interactions, like we mentioned earlier, like making it out to those different events, making sure there's regular updates. But we even had a team that was on a kind of backpacking across India trip to reach some of our more far-reaching, areas of our community at different universities. So it is really kind of putting in that effort. And when you're interested in focusing on a new geography as part of your strategy, it is really having people there. And whether it's part of your team, whether it's your ambassador or community evangelist, really making sure that there's someone always there. Because what we don't want to do, and really what can hinder community growth, is popping in somewhere. And I saw this happening a lot in Korea years ago. It'd be, say, someone like me, I go to Korea, I'm like, hey, here's our project, this is awesome, connect with some wonderful people, and then I just leave and say, go back to New York City. That doesn't foster lasting community growth. People can tell when you're, I think going about it in a more transactional way and not really willing to put in the real effort and community education and resources that either having an evangelist there, hiring someone local, and really building it up from the ground like that, because that's really what will get your community growing and help you, maintain almost these like outposts and new geographies as you look to become a more global project.
Yeah, so we had these outposts and talk to them a little bit about like what kind of events you guys are running. Is it like, hey, we're doing hackathons to try to get more builders in the region?
Absolutely. So we run a series called Proof of Community. That's more of a meetup type series. I would say that depending on where they are and when we're doing them, they can range from a much more sort of technical focused workshop to just a get together with maybe a quick panel discussion, some drinks, some sushi, wine, whatever we have that makes sense for that geography. And those have been great. But another important piece of this kind of in-person community development are the side events alongside these large conferences. And I feel like the side events have reached almost a fever pitch alongside some of these big events. Like I didn't go to Token 2049 this year, and I've heard that it's just a whole other beast right now. And I think that making sure that you have these targeted get-togethers that feel a little more intimate and are not like all night long raves, where people won't really maybe remember a lot about your project, is a key part of this whole strategy too. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be having fun, but I'm saying if you have specific KPIs on your community and marketing side, think about earlier, kind of more comfortable curated side events. Before people kind of go out into the night and head to those raves and whatnot.
Got it. Got it. And so if we could like stack rank, say your marketing priorities, obviously we've got the proof of community. So we're trying to do in-person events. Now, not everyone can make it to in-person events. So talk about like what other methods you guys are not only using to interact with the community, but also trying to expand it.
Yes. So we, of course, like a lot of projects, focus heavily on social. And when I say social, of course, that's everything from community channels like Discord to Twitter to anywhere else you can really think of. And we try to share regular educational resources there. So there's a huge content component to all of this and respond to different questions and really try to take feedback and integrate that into what we're doing. We can't take every single little thing always, but it's always appreciated. And we hope to synthesize that into what we're doing down the line as well. So those are all sort of opportunities for individuals to engage with us and us to really kind of listen to the community when we're not in person. And something we're layering in and testing, which I encourage projects to do because different communities, of course, like different channels better, is newsletter. I remember early on at Consensus, the newsletter was performing really, really well. And I was pretty surprised, not because of Consensus, but because I get so many newsletters, and a lot of them I do not necessarily open. So understanding how your community works is not necessarily how you work is absolutely important. And at Shardeum, we've seen great traction with our newsletter, and we're starting to layer in more video elements because also a lot of individuals want just like 2 seconds of a video clip so that they can kind of understand a little and actually kind of see a person to interact with rather than reading, endless docs. But everyone has their own avenue. And I think it's the project's job to try to create as many avenues as possible that make sense for individuals to engage. So you have a much more diverse community overall in terms of the individuals.
Yeah, let's talk about the marketing channels because I've been pushing newsletters for a little bit. I'm saying like, because I'll go to so many Web3 companies, I'll type in my email and I won't even get a welcome email. I won't even get I was just surprised. Everyone seems to have an email capture system, but they also put zero lead magnet, like no incentive for me to actually put in my email. I just do it because I like email marketing.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about like the different channels you guys have. So you have Discord. Is that the biggest one? I believe there's like 600K subscribers or.
Yes. Yes, that's our largest one. We have a significant subscriber group for our newsletter as well. I'd have to look at the latest numbers, but that's been a really, really great avenue for us. And I would say YouTube videos, actually on the YouTube channel, the numbers are much smaller, but the main idea there is right now that the YouTube, our Shardeum YouTube is almost like a library of the longer form videos where I think we'll see much more traction are those really quick little video clips that are then shared on Twitter. So that's, of course, another big channel for us as well. Those are our primary ones. I don't know, do you count even, say, Telegram as a channel? We don't use it like as a broadcasting piece as much, but of course, it's a place where we engage quite a lot.
Yeah, I count it as a social channel. The thing is, it in my experience attracts a very different consumer. So Discord tends to attract, I would say, people from like the gaming legacy. I would say more traders are in Telegram. So take that for what you want. The nice thing I like about newsletters, because I'm a newsletter shill, is that people have buying intent on newsletters, whereas they do not necessarily have buying intent on something like Discord. Not saying everyone's trying to sell something, but it's a very different person that reads a newsletter versus is in a Telegram group.
I agree with you. And I feel like the newsletter can almost represent, depending on the individuals that you're looking at and hoping to engage with, a different part of their journey. Even some I've seen you can convert some individuals even from Telegram. Again, it depends on the audience to newsletter and you're engaging a little bit more, but you're completely right. I feel like, if they're already subscribed to your newsletter, there's that one step, like they've done something already to engage with you. And that's always a great way to move forward with that type of audience segment. And I think it's really important to then tailor your content accordingly, and try to listen and understand exactly what's resonating.
And one thing I find very curious, and it's actually what I've seen as well, is that YouTube views are not a primary driver. And I've always found this to be quite surprising as to like why that channel does not seem to be as more prevalent.
Yeah, I know. I was pretty surprised about that because I think that probably the greatest traction I saw with YouTube and that type of video format outside of like sharing really quick clips like on social channels were recorded sessions of more technical Q&As. And it was an opportunity that, we would have the community. It's been years now since I'm this specific instance that I'm talking about, but we would have someone from, say, DevRel on, and it was myself or some other folks on the team talking through different questions and points, but then questions would also come in from the community. And those videos tended to get the most views on YouTube by far, which was surprising to me, because I didn't think that that content would stay as exciting and relevant as long, but people would still go back and kind of try to understand where, the project was and where it was going through the lens of some of these types of conversations. And it performed very differently from what I thought it would. Right now, we're sort of experimenting with our strategy around YouTube at Shardeum. But again, it will be more focused on the clips than the longer form videos.
Yeah, my guess about from maybe somebody from DevRel is they're probably more tutorial based. I'm completely speculating, but when I was a developer for Google, I would always look for like coding tutorials because sometimes it just hits different than reading a Stack Overflow article. So let's talk a little bit about some of the like creative strategies you guys have used to position Shardeum, like because there's a lot of L1s, there's a lot of L2s out there. Like, how are you guys trying to differentiate yourself?
Yeah, so a big way that we're differentiating ourselves just on the kind of creative and positioning side of things is we did an entire sort of website and brand refresh. And I would say that those types of activities can be extremely powerful for projects when done correctly, or just kind of be like a tiny drop in a bucket. And it really depends a lot on your community and how you engage with them through the process. I'm really happy to say that it was very impactful for us here at Shardium. And the reason was like a few different things. I think the community was ready for a change in terms of our visual identity and how we presented ourselves because, as a member of a community, you're sort of aligned in a way with like the brand and the project, and you want it to reflect something that's exciting and feels like you to a degree. And our old sort of website and all of that had served a great purpose, but was starting to feel like it wasn't keeping up with who we were growing to be as this community kind of exploded in size and enthusiasm. So we ended up setting up a series of different polls so the community was able to weigh in on specific decisions around our evolved identity and how we present ourselves. And I think we approached it from a place, or at least I did, that you have to assume that people are not necessarily going to care a whole lot about how you present yourself. You can't take it for granted that they will, because people are interested in sometimes speculating. They want to build, they want to do this or that. So you can't just assume it. But I think that through engaging them and through trying some new kind of creative elements that were a little different with the brand, we ended up getting a really excellent response without making any sort of big specific series of announcements around the brand. We saw website visits double in one day. There was a lot more engagement. I think that the overall experience of, learning about Shardium from the website was greatly improved. And then we developed these little creatures. I wish I had a picture to show you. There's one on my computer, but you won't be able to see it, called Shardosaurs that, represent each aspect of the trilemma. So we have, the decentralization, these like cool bat creatures. We have a scalability T-Rex creature and a security kind of like armored turtle creature. And we just had fun with it. And I think the community had a little bit of fun with us, and they were just really well received and just in a strong visual way. So even if we were saying things that were similar around, we're solving the trilemma and all of these interesting things we're working on, because a lot of projects are working on interesting things, visually, it was just a little bit more fun, a little bit more engaging. And we saw a lot of traction come off of that, which was really exciting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then when you guys are like creating marketing campaigns and like doing rebranding, like who are you mostly trying to speak to? Is it like developers? Is it, future investors? Is it, retail users that are using the dApps?
Yeah, I think the tricky part is it's like we're trying to talk to all of them, and you've been in the space for enough too that you know that it's really hard to reach all of them. And it seems like sometimes the investor will be very much almost at odds with the developer, and then, the retail user is going to maybe have completely different priorities. So what we try to do is push the boundaries of kind of colorful and fun without being alienating to any of those groups. So I would say kind of the creatures, the Shardosaurs, and some of the colors and shapes and kind of vibrancy was certainly geared towards developers and some of the retail users that we were hoping to attract in our community down the line. But we just wanted to make sure that it felt executed at a level that would still give confidence to investors, to potential institutional partners, and wouldn't alienate any of those groups to a degree where they didn't want to engage with us. And we struck a good, we luckily were able to also actively get feedback from investors, all of our different aspects of the community. And that really helped us, I think, strike the right balance here, because it can be quite a challenge.
All right, perfect. Now we're going to play a quick game called Overrated or Underrated. And we're going to go through some of the marketing channels. Paid ads, overrated or underrated?
Overrated.
Overrated, why?
Oh my gosh. I just feel like, again, with some of these paid channels, I saw a lot of, not all of them, but a lot of Web 2, like classically trained marketers that I'm sure, even after all my years in market, over 10, 12 years, I'm sure they still know more specific kind of old school marketing terms. And I saw them really relying on paid ads. And then I saw the budgets of the projects just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And I just feel like you don't see the same conversion. It's volatile depending on which channel. I remember trying to run ad tests years ago when we were first thinking about this, and you're not allowed to do it on Twitter or maybe even Facebook. This was so long ago, where then it's working and it's not working, and the community that you're reaching, even when you try to segment it, isn't necessarily there. And it just seemed like a waste of money. I think highly specific targeted paid ads can make sense. And by highly specific, I mean, we had one that we ran that was specifically a guide to an aspect of the project we were working on with an event invitation we were in Lisbon, I think, that for a workshop series we were hosting in Lisbon. And that performed well. We got extra people in the door that maybe wouldn't have known about what we were doing. But anything broader than that, I've just not seen it perform in the way that justified the budget a lot of times.
Yeah, I got to say that is quite a common sentiment. And I don't know if it's that like one attribution is really tricky in Web3. I have some friends that are working on that problem. Or it's just that, it just doesn't tend to reach the right people. So TBD on that. Let's talk a little bit about like overrated, underrated, Twitter Spaces.
I think often overrated. That's a harder one. Yeah, you think so too? Okay. I think that there was an opportunity there that Twitter squandered. And we don't have to get into all of the Twitter related drama, but I think it could have been something much more special and engaging. But I think that if there's an opportunity for you to hop on one, it's a reputable group and you can have a conversation, fine, but I would not hinge my strategy on Twitter Spaces. I just don't think I've seen the level of engagement, even with some of the larger scale ones that I would like to see for the amount of kind of planning to do it right and the level of uncertainty sometimes with what kind of audience you're going to get. But do you feel similarly? I saw you nodding with the
I do
Twitter
feel
spaces.
similarly, to be not to be an absolute Twitter space hater, but I sometimes feel like I get on there, it's like a waste of time. And I just like everyone's just like kind of battling to speak eventually. I'm just like, yeah, I'd rather just have a one-on-one conversation and record it, and then no one listens to the playback ever. Like at least like podcasts are a bit more evergreen, but obviously I'm pumping my own bag. Let's talk a little bit about Web3 social media. So we'll group Farcaster and Lens in the same bucket, but feel free to split those out. Overrated, underrated.
I think briefly it was overrated. I feel like there's a little window in time where everyone was talking about it and there was like a lot of excitement. I think we're still riding a little bit of this, like, it's slightly overrated in terms of who's on there. I think you can, you'll probably be connecting with a very specific Web3 audience, which is great. I do think it can evolve into something that is underrated. And by that, I mean, I think once more folks are getting on there and it's kind of feels more and more kind of, if you know, you know, these are the types of conversations we're having. More and more projects are curating content that makes sense for those social Web3 social media channels. I think we could get there. I just haven't seen what I wanted to see yet. But for this one, I'm much more optimistic and feel like there's a lot of potential for it to grow. I just don't know that we're there at this exact moment.
Yeah, not to agree with you on pretty much every answer here, but I will also say overrated. I'd
I
say
like it.
depending on who your core ICP is, like if your core ICP is developers, then I'd say underrated. Like go hammer that because I think a lot more people's DMs are open on Farcaster than they are on Twitter. Now, Farcaster itself, I can't speak as much to Lens. It just doesn't feel intuitive. I think someone could do a really good video, like YouTube series on how to understand Farcaster in 30 minutes and like people be like frames. I'm like, I still don't get it. Like I get it a little bit. And
Yeah.
I look to Google, like, come on, like I should be like getting it.
Yeah, exactly. Or like I just don't feel like it feels quite right yet, but I think we'll get there. And I feel like that also reflects in a lot of our Web3 consumer facing applications and experiences and overall like what it feels like to use Web3 is that we're getting there. But I think the experience will improve more and more. And when that happens, everything will become even more valuable overall. So it feels like it's all trending in the right direction. And I feel like um, those Web3 social channels are almost like a little indicator of that as well.
And I have a feeling I know what you're going to answer on this one, but Discord, overrated, underrated.
I feel like it is, I would say underrated, but I feel like we know that it's really, really important. So I can't say that it's necessarily underrated, but it's definitely not overrated. It's been extremely valuable for us. It's a great place to connect with the community, and it's also a great place to start understanding who in the community could be an evangelist that you want to work with more, if you're kind of setting up an ambassador program or everyone is there and it's very, very active. You can get lost in the noise sometimes, of course, like with a lot of these other channels, but if anything, it's underrated, at least from kind of the value that we see in it.
Do you find it really difficult to manage such a large community in Discord, or you feel like, hey, the tooling they have is like really good? I don't really know where else you could possibly run a community at that scale that you're currently doing.
Yeah, I think it's the only place. I think that, always tooling and everything can be improved to make things a little easier. And of course, the more individuals that are highly skilled in community building that you have on your team, that's kind of really, I think, what makes the big difference in terms of large scale community management on Discord over some of the tooling and experience that they offer. But there's just nowhere else that's quite like it that I've seen across all of the Web3 channels and ways to engage. So we still really focus in on that overall. And it's just kind of don't forget the human element. You can't have a giant community and not think that and think that you can not invest in bringing some people in to sort of manage and keep things going. And I think secondly, you just have to be okay with a degree of chaos. I mean, we work in Web3, things are changing all the time. If you have a giant community, things are going to be stressful or intense at times. You just have to understand that's part of the job too.
Absolutely. Short form video.
I think underrated. When done correctly. And I would say not a lot are done correctly, but I think that this is a huge gap that we can bridge where we focused a lot on longer form content in Web3 over the years, or at least the projects I've worked with. And I think that's great. There's a place for that, absolutely. But we see with a lot of the world, not just in our little Web3 bubble and echo chamber, super short form content performs extremely well. And people are keen to have 2 seconds of entertainment. And if you can kind of slip something that you're also learning about your project or a fun thing to do or engage with, then I think you're really on to something. We don't have to completely reinvent the wheel here. So I think if we can make our short form content a little bit more fun, a little bit more engaging, and kind of look at the rest of the world instead of kind of getting stuck within our Web3 communities, we can have those perform much, much better than they have been.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Spans.
Yeah, short attention spans. It's quite interesting. The only project, and you might know better than I do, is the only project I've really seen is like maybe Sappy Seals and of course Pudgy Penguins, but they're not really talking too much about crypto topics. They've just somehow been able to bleed from Web3 into Web2. They're the best I've seen do it.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially the pudgies around everywhere and their kind of strategy overall. And it doesn't hurt that it's just adorable. So I do think that that type of approach makes a lot of sense. And I think that it's kind of one of those things where if you're having fun with someone and something being kind of a brand or a project, you just have a lot more affinity for them. So when there is sort of like a quick educational moment, it doesn't all have to be this is what this is what that is. You're much more receptive because you already feel like you have a relationship and you're already enjoying the interaction. And I think that that's sometimes what's missing. We just are excited and want to just talk about every single thing that we're doing without really building a relationship first. And I think the short form videos can be a great way to build those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of our goals is, of course, to get like more marketers into this space. Talk to us a little bit about like what are, let's say they're a Web2 marketer, maybe they're even new to the marketing space. They've done like copywriting before. What are some of the skills you think people need to develop to be successful as a marketer in Web3?
Absolutely. I really think it's helpful if you either have experience in a startup or have a high tolerance and or appetite for, almost like risk or excitement, or you like a little bit of adrenaline, because beyond like the specific skills that you would have or need to learn, I think it's almost the reality of the culture. Since a lot of Web3 projects are still in relatively early stages, we have some mature ones that I think would fit sort of a different marketer demographic. But I think just being willing and able and understanding of the constantly evolving workplace environment. Like there's pivots, there's changes, there's a lot of people that you're going to work with that maybe have never worked in a more structured environment before. And you're going to have to kind of be able to roll with the punches to a degree, but also stand by what you know makes sense in your own realm. And that can be a tough balance to strike, but I do think it's absolutely worth it. So I think that that kind of, at least understanding that ahead of time, I think helps a lot. It goes back to that like setting expectations. Like, hey, this is going to be like maybe some ups and downs and there's a lot of excitement and things are changing, but that's part of the fun of this. You're going to be on your toes, and just being able to sort of go with that and feel collaborative still and know that you're going to work with a lot of different personality types, a little of that will go a long way. But I think outside of that, getting ready for maybe applying to a Web3 role is, researching the project that you're looking at, checking out even the YouTube videos, even if there's not a lot of views, they'll give you a sense of how they talk about the project. Like learn the vocabulary a little bit. You don't have to understand all of it, but if they're clearly focused on scaling or if they're clearly focused on decentralization and community, getting a little bit of an understanding of that will help you do a better job, but also help you get that job.
Absolutely. And then let's say, probably the builders have left the marketing episode, but if they're still here, tell them a little bit about, is there an area of Web3 where you're like, hey, I feel like this is underinvested in, or like, hey, if someone could build the marketing attribution software of Web3, like that would be a great achievement. Is there anything you see that would be like a great startup idea or tooling we need?
Yeah, that would be really, I mean, there's so many things. On the marketing side, I would say just some kind of, if I could better understand across all of the different channels that I work with in one place, roughly where people are, kind of rough other kind of demographics, and how they see themselves in terms of how technical they are. That would be incredibly helpful on a nice, like clean, I want a good user experience, really focus on that type of dashboard would be great. Another project that I think I had talked about with some former colleagues like years ago, and I think some people are working on it, is I had Signal, I had Telegram, I had Slack, I had Gmail, and I'm getting messages from people across all of them and having some place where it's much easier to see every single message in one place would help from a marketing standpoint, because a lot of marketing, as you know, is also having these conversations with potential partners, with other marketers, with, you know, community members, with vendor, everyone, you know, working with investors as well, and having that all in one place, organized in a really clear way, would take away a little bit of the chaos and help us be a little more impactful, I think, rather than opening, you know, 5 different applications.
100%. You guys have heard of liquidity fragmentation, but now welcome to messaging app fragmentation. And I have one friend that built a CRM for Telegram, and that has been incredibly helpful. But it's like, well, can I have that also update Go High Level or like another CRM? Because like, yeah, you've got email, you've got all these text messaging apps, and it's like, well, I need to make sure I'm contacting people at least like once a month, once every 2 months. So dashboards at the end of the day. Dashboards.
Just some nice dashboards.
Please. Okay.
We can dream.
So where can that is the ultimate dream. So where can listeners learn more about you, learn more about Shardeum, get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say the best place, shardeum.org, is our website, and at Shardeum on Twitter is great. For me personally, I'm on LinkedIn, which actually we didn't talk about as a channel, but for depending on the audience that you're looking at, can be really, really helpful. So send a message on there. And then I'm at Hey McGuire on Twitter, and you can reach out. I mean, I'm less active as an individual on there. So reaching out those other avenues is always helpful. And you can send us a note through the Shardeum website as well. And we'll be happy to answer questions or talk to folks. Or if you're a marketer or you're going to some conferences, sometimes I'll host like a little drinks or coffee event. It's nice to have a feeling of solidarity among marketers in this space as well.
Absolutely. So real quick, because you mentioned it, LinkedIn, overrated, underrated?
Underrated.
Underrated.
I mean, it's a lot of really ridiculous stories, and I see so many excellent kind of jokes and memes about it. Like, you know, I helped this dog on my way to the interview, and I got there and the dog was interviewing me. Like, and I love it. And it's so many ridiculous and not intentionally funny stories as well. But if you're looking for investors, if you're an investment firm, you know, trying to communicate with LPs and anyone, maybe institutional partners, think about just having a little bit of a presence on there, especially as an individual or a founder.
All right. Well, Building Web3 will be redoing our LinkedIn pages this weekend so we can get back and take advantage of an underrated platform. Kelsey, thank you so much for coming on here, and to all the listeners, let's get back to building the future of Web3.